Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're taking on a field that, let's be honest, is often seen as invisible, maybe a bit slow, or just plain bureaucratic,
Right.
but which is, in fact, the indispensable architect of the modern world. We are diving deep into public administration.
Or PA, yeah. And it really does suffer from a massive image problem, doesn't it?
It really does.
When people hear public administration,
Right.
they immediately think of, waiting in a long line at the DMV or filling out some form in triplicate.
Endless forms.
Endless forms. But what we're actually talking about is the very scaffolding of civilization itself. It's the invisible backbone that makes sure the water in your tap is safe to drink.
That the roads connect your cities.
Exactly.
Right.
And that society doesn't just, devolve into chaos the second a new politician takes office.
Yeah.
It touches absolutely everything you do, whether you realize it or not.
And for you, our listener, and we know you're insanely curious about how the gears of the world actually turn, our mission today is to tackle the foundational, almost philosophical identity crisis at the very heart of PA.
It's been fighting with itself for over a century.
100 years. So we need to know, is it a rigorous science or is it more of an intuitive art? Or is it just, as some critics say, a collection of borrowed ideas?
And maybe the biggest question of all.
How is running a government fundamentally, and I mean practically, different from running, say, a huge multinational corporation that's only obsessed with profit?
Right. And to get at any of that, we have to start with the administrator herself, or himself. We have to figure out who that person sitting at that governmental desk actually is.
Why start there?
Because the answer to that question, it determines the very nature of the state. So we have to begin with what's known as the Michael C. Spicer debate.
Okay, let's unpack this right away, because it feels like this entire discussion really hinges on one question. Is the administrator, the civil servant, the bureaucrat, the regulator, are they a cold, programmable robot just following lines of code? Or are they an autonomous decision maker guided by their own moral and political compass?
Exactly. And this isn't just theory. This isn't just academic talk. This decides how a police officer on the street acts, how a food safety inspector makes a call, or how a tax official treats your case every single day.
So what did Spicer say? How did he break it down?
Well, Spicer, he categorized the theoretical approaches into two very distinct camps.
Yeah.
It's all about the role and the status of the bureaucrat.
Okay.
On one side, you have what he called the instrumental view. Now, this is the traditional, sort of classical take. It dates way back to the late 19th century, this idea that you can separate politics from administration.
So in this view, they're just the tools.
They are purely the mechanism. The instrumental view sees administrators as non-autonomous servants. They're skilled technicians, sure, but they're merely instruments.
To be used.
To be used to implement the strict, precise, literal will of the political executive. They just follow orders, no questions asked. They act as these neutral experts serving whoever happens to be in power at the time.
Their job is just efficiency. Get it done.
Get it done. So, if the elected government says, build a bridge right here, their only job is to find the fastest, cheapest way to build that bridge. They don't ask about land rights or environmental impact unless it's strictly legally forbidden.
Right. Their morality is just the law and the directive from above, nothing else.
That's the instrumental view in a nutshell.
Yeah.
But then you have the complete opposite perspective. This is the discretionist view. And this is the one that has become pretty much widely accepted in modern democratic theory.
And this view says?
This view asserts that administrators are not just technicians. They are, and this is a huge leap, autonomous governors.
Whoa. That's a massive change in status, from a tool to a governor.
It's enormous. And this perspective, it really came about because of the complexity of the modern welfare state. A policy decided by a legislature, it's often really broad, kind of ambiguous.
Sometimes it even contradicts other policies.
It often does. So the administrator can't just blindly follow orders. They have to interpret. They have to apply judgment. And often they have to make these, quasi-legislative choices right there on the ground.
Because the rule book just can't cover every single possible scenario you might run into.
No way. The discretionist view says they're driven by deeper constitutional and institutional values. Things like democracy, secularism, equality, public welfare.
So their job isn't just following orders from a politician.
No. It's applying informed judgment, but within an institutional framework that itself carries these deep-seated values. They're focused on delivering the greatest possible welfare, even when the details of how to do that are, murky at best.
Okay, but hold on a minute. If the administrator is an autonomous governor, driven by their own interpretation of these big constitutional values, doesn't that immediately make them an unelected political actor?
Ah, now you've hit the core tension.
I mean, how does a democratic state control a massive professional bureaucracy that's driven by its own sense of right and wrong? That seems like a huge risk for political abuse or institutional capture.
That is the ultimate dilemma, and it's a thing that keeps political scientists and PA academics busy. It's a constant balancing act. While they gain autonomy in, say, interpretation and application, that's the discretionist side, they are still bound by the political mandate and the legal structure that created them.
The instrumental side.
The instrumental side. That tension between being a neutral tool and a value-driven governor, that is what defines the entire academic struggle for public administration's identity. It dictates how transparent they need to be, how they handle dissent inside their own agencies, and ultimately how much power they truly wield over you, the citizen.
That's a perfect setup for the next foundational question then, because given this internal tension where the practitioner is both a technician and a moral agent, the field has spent decades arguing over its academic identity.
Right.
So we have to start with that classic dichotomy. Is PA an art or is it a science? Because if it's neither, it really doesn't have any academic standing at all.
Well, let's take the art part first, because that one is, I'd say, pretty uncontroversial.
Oh, okay.
Yes, PA is undoubtedly an art. We're talking about the effective execution of goals. Administration uses specific, teachable techniques and principles that require skill, intuition, and a lot of practice.
Things like what?
Well, resource allocation, coordinating huge teams of people, planning incredibly complex logistical maneuvers, successful negotiation, these are all skills that can be learned, they can be honed, and they can be mastered over time. So it easily qualifies under the umbrella of an art or, a craft.
The craft of getting things done efficiently, but in a political environment.
Precisely. But the second you claim it's a science, especially in a rigorous academic way, that's where the classical challenges just come flooding in.
Right. And the toughest challenge comes from that rigid, classical, positivist viewpoint, which, it dominated scientific thought for a very long time.
It did. And the positivist critique is simple. And on the surface, it's devastating.
That is it.
It says that true science requires objective study, it needs control groups, repeatable experiments, and the ability to capture data in a strictly controlled laboratory setting.
And the raw material of public administration is human behavior. It's motivation, political will, social complexity. You can't put a civil war or a national education policy under a microscope and repeat the variables exactly.
You absolutely can't. Human behavior is inherently subjective, it's unpredictable, and it's influenced by countless cultural and historical factors. So from that rigid physical science perspective, PA is not a science. It's a soft subject, maybe a policy study, but not a true science. And that critique, it really stunted the academic confidence of the field for decades.
But the sources we looked at, they show these really formidable defenses to this criticism, led by some of the biggest names in sociology and philosophy. You've got scholars like Max Weber stepping up and saying, wait a minute, you're using the wrong measuring stick.
You're defining science too narrowly.
Exactly.
And Weber's defense is just foundational to all of modern social science. He agreed, you can't treat humans like molecules in a test tube. But he argued that social science is a science, it just operates under a different epistemological framework than physical science.
What does that mean, a different framework?
Well, physical science studies only objective things. Mass, velocity, chemical reactions. Social science, however, is the objective study of both objective things and subjective things.
Subjective things like what? Values, beliefs?
Values, beliefs, motivations, human interpretations, meaning. Weber introduced this crucial concept of Verstehen.
What is?
Interpretive understanding. He said social scientists can objectively study how people subjectively give meaning to their own actions. For instance, you can't measure democracy like you measure gravity.
Right.
But you can objectively study the systems people create and use to implement their belief in democracy. So by recognizing that social scientists have to understand the subjective world of the people they're studying, PA gets to keep its scientific rigor while still acknowledging its messy human focus.
Yeah, that completely reframes the whole debate. PA is trying to systematically understand and predict human and institutional behavior in a governing context. It's using methods that are appropriate to that context.
It's a systemic analytical approach, even if it doesn't have the mathematical precision of, say, physics.
And then Karl Popper comes in and sort of levels the playing field.
He really does. Popper brought in the philosophical equalizer. He argued that all knowledge, even in the so-called hard sciences, is fundamentally provisional. It's all subject to falsification. It's not absolute truth.
So even something like physics could be overturned tomorrow by a new discovery.
Potentially, yes. And if we accept that science itself is this moving target, this ongoing process of refining our theories, then PA isn't uniquely disqualified from being a science.
So it's just a matter of degree. It's less precise than chemistry, maybe, but it follows a systematic method and is constantly evolving because the society it governs is constantly evolving. It's a progressive science.
A progressive methodological science.
Yeah.
But that still leaves this lingering question. Does it actually stand on its own as a true discipline? Because here, the sources reveal a really famous, almost existential crisis of identity.
This is where we get to Dwight Waldo's famous crisis of identity. The whole field was basically founded on this idea of a politics-administration dichotomy, that you could separate them and study administration neutrally.
Right.
But when that idea failed in practice, when everyone realized they were deeply intertwined, the entire field was just left adrift.
It was. And then Gerald Caden piled on with one of the most blistering critiques, arguing that PA is an underdeveloped discipline. But the harshest criticism, the one you really need to know, is that it's just a bag of borrowings.
I love that phrase.
It's a great phrase. The idea that it's just stealing its vocabulary, its organizational charts, its planning techniques, and all its principles, from management science, from political science, economics, sociology.
So if it borrows everything, what's its unique academic contribution?
That's the challenge. It's a valid one. If you're drawing from all these other fields, why shouldn't we just call PA, I don't know, applied politics or governmental management? Where is the unique academic core?
So what's the defense?
The defense really rests on two main pillars. First, you have to look at the nature of modern academia itself. Modern academic disciplines are naturally multidisciplinary. They're eclectic.
Nothing exists in a vacuum.
Nothing. Economics borrows heavily from psychology. Physics borrows from mathematics. So PA being multidisciplinary isn't a weakness, it's actually a necessity, given how complex its subject matter governance actually is.
Okay, that's the first pillar. And the second?
The second pillar is that while PA does draw from many sources, it has a distinct and unique core that defines its intellectual real estate. Government in action.
Government in action.
No other discipline focuses solely on the practical, the ethical, the legal, and the operational implementation of the state's will, all within a democratic constitutional framework. That distinct focus on implementation is what makes it unique.
And we can sort of validate its academic standing just by looking at history, right? I mean, the fact that universities all over the world teach it, that there are dedicated research centers, that specialized degrees exist.
Like the one first offered by Lucknow University in India.
Right. All of that shows it has a massive, unique body of knowledge that can be formally taught and researched.
And that trajectory, from art and science to a discipline, leads us directly to its status as a profession.
Ah, okay. So to be a full-on profession, like a lawyer or a medical doctor or a CPA, you need a really high bar for entry.
A very high bar. We can actually define 5 universal requirements for professional status. It's like a checklist of professional maturity.
Okay, what are they?
1. A defined body of knowledge. 2. Prolonged, standardized training. 3. An acceptance of social responsibility. 4. A strict, universally enforced code of conduct. And 5. A functional, self-policing parent body.
So how does public administration stack up against that 5-point checklist?
It's generally considered a profession in making, or a semi-profession. It meets the first 3 pretty easily.
Okay.
It has the body of knowledge check. It often requires prolonged training for entry into senior civil service roles check. And social responsibility, I mean, that's inherent in its whole mission to serve the public. So, check.
So where does it stumble? It must be the last 2.
It hits major structural barriers on the last 2 points, and they're arguably the most crucial for becoming a full profession. First, it lacks a universal, legally binding code of conduct that governs all practitioners everywhere.
So there's nothing like the Hippocratic Oath for doctors or the rules of professional conduct for lawyers.
Exactly. There are codes, for sure, but they're often specific to one agency or one country. They aren't universal professional standards.
And second, there's no singular parent association.
Correct. There's no equivalent of the American Bar Association for lawyers or the American Medical Association for doctors. No single body that polices the profession, sets disciplinary standards, and controls who gets in.
Administrators are overseen by politicians and legislative committees, not by their own peers.
And that's all underscored by the practical reality that in most government systems, you don't strictly need a public administration degree to become a professional administrator.
That's a huge point. You can get to the top ranks of government service with a degree in engineering or history or philosophy or literature.
Absolutely. And that fact just completely undermines the exclusivity and the control over entry that a true profession demands. It reinforces this idea that PA is an application of governance skills, not a closed professional field defined by its academic degree.
So it's valued for its outcome good governance more than for its exclusive academic entry ticket.
Exactly right.
So we've established PA is a science of degree, an eclectic discipline with a distinct core and a profession in making. Now we have to draw its boundaries clearly. Let's compare it to its closest intellectual relatives, starting with the one it came from, political science.
Political science is often called the mother discipline. And for a long time, especially back in the 19th century, they were basically inseparable. They share the same subject, the state.
Right. Political science studies the state itself, the philosophy behind it, theories of power, the history of government structures, the legal frameworks of constitutions.
While PA, by contrast, is just the state in action.
And that's where the initial conflict came up, right? Especially in the U.S. with Woodrow Wilson and his famous articulation of the politics-administration dichotomy. A lot of scholars just dismissed PA as a minor, non-theoretical sub-branch of political science.
The thinking was, if you're studying the state, why do you need a whole separate field just to study what the state does?
It seems a bit condescending.
It was. That initial belief that administration was this neutral, simple process you could divorce from politics, that was actually necessary to kickstart PA as its own academic field.
Mm-hmm.
But the distinction today is much more nuanced and I think much more vital.
How so?
Political science deals with the philosophical and the normative aspects of the state. It defines what the state should be and how policies should be structured.
Which is crucial knowledge, but it's fundamentally insufficient to actually manage a complex modern nation. Political science can spend a decade debating the optimal structure of a healthcare system, but it can't tell you how to hire the 50,000 nurses you need to staff it, or how to manage the procurement contracts for all the equipment, or how to handle the political fallout when funding runs short.
Exactly. Political science can decree there shall be clean water for all, but it can't claim total control because it doesn't address the practical, grinding realities of implementation.
Staffing the municipal water boards, managing complex bond issues,
Designing regulatory oversight to prevent contamination. All of that. That's the domain of PA. Executing the will of the state, managing the bureaucracy, and making sure services actually get delivered on time and within budget.
So one defines what should be done, the other defines how it gets done, effectively, ethically, and legally. They're separate domains of inquiry, even if they share the same subject.
And that separation becomes even clearer when we move to the sister discipline, management science, or private administration.
Right.
This relationship is arguably even more complex because PA openly borrows its technical tools.
Yeah.
So if the administration side of General Motors looks just like the administration side of the Department of Defense, are they really separate fields?
I mean, they borrow everything from staffing to auditing. If the toolkit is identical, the fields must be identical, right? That's the argument.
Well, this is where the crucial differentiator comes in, and it's perhaps the single most important thing for our listener to grasp. They're separated by their purpose. Yes, PA borrows the technical tools, the methodology of how you organize people and resources, but the application and the motive are fundamentally different.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Let's dig into those core distinctions in purpose, beyond just saying profit versus welfare.
Okay, so management, especially private administration, is fundamentally fact-oriented. Its ultimate measurable goal is maximum profit, minimum waste, and increased shareholder value.
The bottom line.
It is all about the bottom line. Every single decision, from staffing levels to strategic planning, is filtered through the lens of increasing revenue or reducing costs to enhance the profit margin. Performance is measured by measurable financial facts.
And the administrator or the manager in that context is acting on behalf of the owners or the shareholders.
Correct. Public administration, on the other hand, is profoundly value-oriented. Now, it certainly cares about efficiency. Nobody wants government waste, and efficiency is a public value. But it has to aim for a multitude of other, often competing democratic values at the same time. Equity, transparency, fairness, access, legality.
Okay, so give me an example. A private company deciding where to open a new store uses one value, maximum sales potential, period.
Right.
A government agency deciding where to open a new public health clinic has to balance efficiency with equity. So they might open the clinic in a remote, low-income area where demand is high, but where the administrative cost per person served is incredibly inefficient from a purely financial perspective.
That is the perfect example. You can't run a public distribution system, which is a state-run food subsidy program aimed at food security, purely for profit. It doesn't work.
The goal isn't profit.
The goal is distributing necessary resources fairly, making sure nobody starves, even if that means the operation itself is economically inefficient in market terms. That simultaneous focus on efficiency and equity makes PA inherently more complicated than just chasing the highest return.
It means the administrator has to navigate this moral and political landscape that a private firm, which is only accountable to its investors, simply doesn't have to deal with.
The private manager's goal is singular: profit. The public manager's goal is multiple: efficiency, equity, legality, transparency, responsiveness. It's a juggling act.
And that's why the job is so challenging. The tool might look the same, a standardized accounting method, for instance, but the internal pressures, the accountability structure, and the ultimate moral obligation of the public administration professional are fundamentally different from those in the private sector.
We spent a lot of time dissecting what PA is and what it isn't. I think now we need to look at the ultimate profound purpose of this field. Let's move beyond the academic critiques and into the grand philosophy of why it matters to civilization itself.
I like that. This is where we get to the moral compass of the field, which was so famously summarized by Graham Wallace.
Right. He said that in what he called the Great Society, the role of public administration is not just to manage the day-to-day traffic. Its ultimate mission is to actively work towards the creation of a good society.
While at the same time,
actively laboring to obstruct the creation of an evil society.
That is an immense burden of responsibility that turns the administrator into a kind of moral gatekeeper. It's not just about maintaining the status quo, it's about moral and social engineering towards a better, more just future, all through the act of implementation.
And that's precisely why scholars like Waldo and Beard argue that civilization itself depends entirely on effective administration. And they weren't being hyperbolic. They warned that if PA fails, if those underlying systems break down, if the legal framework becomes corrupt, if the supply chain of basic services just stops,
society risks complete chaos, civil war, disintegration.
Exactly. PA is the indispensable, true backbone of the modern welfare state. It provides the essential stability, the continuity, and the framework that any complex society needs to function. Without it, the market fails, law and order collapses, and the social contract just dissolves.
And this profound importance, it connects directly to the citizen through this idea of the big state.
Right. Since the mid-20th century, government intervention has just exploded. In a big state, government touches literally every single aspect of a citizen's life.
From the air you breathe to the price controls on your medicine.
The safety regulations at your workplace, the pension you hope to get when you retire, the state is omnipresent. And therefore, the citizen's daily lived interaction with the state is almost entirely through the administrator, not the politician you see on TV.
So Ridley's concept of citizenship, it suggests that PA is the medium through which people become aware of their rights and their duties.
Yes. When a policy is delivered fairly, transparently, and efficiently, when the administrator is seen as that moral agent pursuing the good society, citizens trust the state and engage responsibly.
But when that delivery is poor or biased or just inefficient, then suspicion, cynicism, and ultimately political fragmentation start to set in. The administrator is the face of governance.
And on that note, it's probably important to mention the practice of secondbertiment.
Right. This is a mechanism designed to bridge the understanding between the two spheres we just talked about, public and private.
Secondbertiment is where employees move temporarily between the public and private sectors. It's critical for professional development, but also for removing that suspicion we just talked about.
So when a seasoned private sector manager spends, say, 6 months inside a large government department,
they gain a real appreciation for the suffocating constraints of public accountability and the legal framework. They suddenly realize why things move so slowly.
Because every single expenditure might get audited by a legislative committee 5 years from now?
Exactly. And conversely, when an administrator goes to work at a private firm, they internalize the need for efficiency, for risk-taking, for speed, and that profit-driven decisiveness you need in commerce. This cross-pollination, it builds empathy, and it generates much better, more practical policy advice for politicians.
Now let's get really specific. Let's detail the practical actions that confirm PA's immense importance. These are the key functions that keep society running day to day. This is the definition of government in action.
We can list about 8 major functions from our sources that really show the breadth of PA's involvement. First, and most basic, maintaining law and order and stability.
Foundational.
It is. PA ensures the continuity of the state apparatus. It provides crucial stability when political executives change. The courts, the police, the general administrative machine, they don't stop working just because of an election. Second, revenue collection. This is crucial for funding the state, collecting taxes, customs duties, other revenues. It's the financial bedrock that pays for everything else, from national defense to public schools. Without effective PA here, the state is bankrupt.
Third, policy advice. Administrators are crucial expert advisors to, let's face it, amateur politicians.
They are. They have the institutional memory, the technical expertise, the data you need to create viable, realistic policies that avoid the mistakes of the past. They translate political aspiration into achievable governmental reality.
Fourth is implementation of policy. This is the core action.
It's taking the political will, the laws passed by the legislature, and turning them into practical reality on the ground. Building a new power grid, launching a new education standard, whatever it is.
This is equity.
Right. PA is responsible for allocating resources fairly across all kinds of different populations, especially where resources are scarce. This goes back to that value orientation, making sure marginalized groups get a proportional share of public resources.
Number 6 is services. This is managing things like public sector undertakings, or PSUs.
Yes, these are state-owned enterprises that run essential infrastructure national railway networks, public electricity grids like NTPC in India, or state-run oil companies like ONGC. These are massive economic engines, but they operate under public service mandates.
Number 7 is social justice.
A critical function. This is about helping the weaker sections of society through targeted non-market schemes. Managing systems like the public distribution system for subsidized food, or managing specific welfare grants. This is the practical manifestation of building that good society.
And finally, number 8.
Stabilizing the economy. While we often think of the Treasury or the Finance Ministry, it's PA that manages the implementation of fiscal and monetary policy that regulates markets and that tries to mitigate the worst effects of economic cycles to ensure stability and growth.
When you lay it all out like that, it's stunningly clear. PA isn't just about managing inefficiency. It is the comprehensive logistical apparatus required to prevent societal collapse and deliver on the promise of the welfare state.
If it were to vanish tomorrow, civilization doesn't just slow down. It pretty much ceases to function almost instantly.
Okay, so now we arrive at the central perennial debate that has fueled public administration studies for over a century: public versus private administration. Are they fundamentally the same, just working in different contexts, or are they different species entirely?
And this is essential because the answer dictates how we regulate them, how we manage them, and how we hold them accountable.
Let's start with the argument for similarity, often called the generic view. This is the prevailing thought among the classical scholars, the ones who wanted to prove PA could be a science. If administration was universal, then it was scientific.
Exactly. You think of foundational management thinkers like Henri Fayol, Lyndall Urwick, Mary Parker Follett. They all argued that administration is inherently generic. The basic principles you need to organize people and resources are universal.
Whether you're making shoes or defending a nation, you still have to plan, organize, and direct.
You do. And they often use that famous management acronym, POSDCORB.
We should probably define that for the listener because it's the core of the generic argument.
Right. POSDCORB stands for planning, organizing, staffing, directing, coordinating, reporting, and budgeting. The generic view says that these 7 activities are necessary to achieve efficiency in any large organization.
Regardless of the goal, profit or welfare, doesn't matter.
If the tools are identical, the activity is fundamentally similar. And today, the lines are blurring even more, leading to this significant modern convergence.
We see private firms engaging heavily in social welfare through corporate social responsibility, CSR mandates. They're running orphanages, funding community projects.
They're internalizing public values. And conversely, you see public sector undertakings, those PSUs we mentioned, like state energy companies, operating with a strong profit motive. They compete in the market, they care about market share, they're judged on their financial returns, even though they're state-owned.
And there's even research that supports this blurred reality by looking at the function, not just the ownership. Studies by Hash and Hall and Pugh and Henning.
Right, they found that similarity depends on the activity, not the legal title of the owner. And that's a crucial empirical insight.
So a government-run, large urban school system operates far more like a large private academy than it does like, say, a government tax collection office.
Exactly. The function defines the administrative similarity more than the political ownership does. And the very existence of hybrid organizations, part public, part private, proves they're not entirely separate species that can't interbreed.
So there's a strong case for similarity.
A very strong case. But despite all these compelling similarities, the argument for dissimilarity remains incredibly robust. The differences are so substantial that they change the very nature of the administrative act. They differ in degree so much that it becomes a difference in kind.
Okay, where do we start?
Let's start with the big one, the non-negotiable difference: accountability and scrutiny.
Public administration is fundamentally accountable to the people and their elected political representatives, the legislature. And this massive, sometimes suffocating layer of public scrutiny just doesn't exist for private administration.
Private administration is accountable, of course, but primarily to its shareholders, its board, its owners, and to regulators only in specific legal compliance areas.
But PA operates in what Huxley famously called a glass house.
A total glass house. Every failure, every expenditure, every staffing decision can be criticized by the media, investigated by legislative committees, and scrutinized in public courts. Private firms, by contrast, are opaque. They guard their secrets. They don't have open public records requirements.
Then there's the legal framework. PA is strictly bound by laws, rules, procedures, constitutional mandates. It's all about enforcing uniformity and predictability.
And that legally enforced rigidity, it creates massive operational differences. A private administration enjoys far more flexibility and autonomy. They can reorganize their entire company, shift strategy, or alter pricing overnight to seize a market opportunity.
A public agency just can't do that.
Can't move with that speed. The legal framework is the administrator's master, and this leads directly to the issue of uniformity versus discrimination. And this is perhaps the most defining ethical constraint.
Public administration must treat all citizens equally under the law. It demands absolute uniformity in service delivery.
A private business, however, is not only allowed to discriminate, it's often legally required to maximize profit. They offer different deals, different services, or different prices to different clients based on market segmentation, loyalty programs, individual negotiation.
They're operating based on maximizing contract value, not on constitutional equality.
That difference in fundamental moral constraint is just huge. Then the difference in goal is obvious. PA is service-oriented, focusing on social good. Private is profit-oriented. The market structure is different too. Government often holds a legal monopoly, think national defense, the courts.
Whereas private sectors inherently operate in competition.
Right, which drives innovation and efficiency in a way that public monopolies just aren't forced to. And finally, the financial architecture is completely different. Public administration operates under external financial control.
The legislature approves the budget, controls the flow of funds, and external bodies like the Comptroller and Auditor General audit the spending. The administrator can't just move funds between line items without legal approval.
But in a private firm, finance and administration are integrated. The CFO manages internal financial control, moving resources rapidly based on strategic need. That separation of powers between administration and finance in the public sphere is a massive, deliberate design choice.
Purely to ensure accountability to the taxpayer and prevent corruption.
Exactly. And this moves us into the crucial theoretical reasons why government intervention, and therefore public administration, is absolutely necessary in the first place, no matter how efficient the private sector is.
This is the ultimate defense of PA's unique existence.
This is a crucial theoretical distinction highlighted by scholars like Robert Dahl and Charles Lindblom. They contrasted polyarchy, which is the system of government, with the market economy, the system of private enterprise. And they identify these key areas where the market inherently fails the collective good, which then mandates PA's existence.
The first failure is the public goods problem, or what's commonly known as the free rider problem.
Right. Public goods, think of streetlights or national defense or clean air, they are non-excludable. Once they exist, you can't stop people from benefiting from them.
So people, acting rationally in their own self-interest, won't voluntarily pay for them. Why would I pay for the streetlight if I can benefit from it even if I don't pay?
Precisely. So the goods won't be produced by the private sector because there's no way to guarantee revenue. So the state has to step in. It has to use its unique power of coercion tax to ensure these necessary collective goods are funded and provided.
The public sector has to solve the free rider problem because the private sector can't. Okay, what's the second area of market failure?
The second area is individual incompetence or incomplete knowledge. We, as citizens, we can't always judge the quality or safety of every single product or service we consume.
No way. I can't tell if my food has been adulterated, or if the building materials in my kid's school are safe, or if the drugs I'm buying are fake.
Right. The cost of acquiring perfect information on everything is impossible.
Yeah.
So the public sector, through regulatory PA, has to step in. It has to regulate quality, set safety standards, and provide oversight to protect citizens who are individually incompetent to judge complex safety criteria.
So that regulatory function is essential for public health and just for basic trust in society. And the third failure.
Externalities, or spillovers. These are costs or benefits that get imposed on a third party who did not agree to the transaction. And pollution is the classic example.
A private firm trying to maximize its profit will naturally dump pollution into a river. It externalizes the cost onto the public health system, the environment, and the people living downstream.
And that pollution doesn't show up on their internal balance sheet, so they just ignore it. Only public administration has the scope and the authority to regulate these external impacts, using things like taxes or fines or mandates to force firms to internalize those societal costs.
That perfectly defines the unique required role of PA. It steps in precisely where the market, which is optimized for profit and individual transactions, inherently fails the collective good and the constitutional mandate of equality.
And we should finish by noting Moore's value proposition. The private sector provides value at a cost higher than production. That's the profit margin.
Right.
The public sector, by its nature, provides value at a cost equal to or less than production, because it's often heavily subsidized to ensure universal access and equity.
And finally, Ben and Gauss summarize all these distinctions based on 3 points. Access, who can use it; agency, who acts, the political branch or the market; and interest, who ultimately benefits the individual owner or the common good.
And that categorization, whether it's from Ben and Gauss or from Blau and Scott, who divided organizations based on their primary beneficiary into commonweal for the public and business for the private, it just confirms that while the operational methods might look similar, the fundamental theoretical and moral reasons for why they exist are profoundly and necessarily distinct.
This has been a deeply insightful look into a field that, well, truly keeps the lights on, the water flowing, and the social contract intact. We started with the administrator as this simple, neutral tool, and we ended with the administrator as a necessary, complex moral governor operating in the face of inevitable market failures.
To synthesize this entire huge debate, while the arguments for similarity, the generic management tools, the POST-CORB ideas, are strong and they're undeniable, the accepted verdict in modern PA is that public and private administration differ in degree, not purely in kind.
They share methods.
They share methods, but they are never exactly the same because of their environment and their ultimate fundamental purpose.
So let's just quickly recap those key differentiators for you, the listener, to take away.
Public administration is defined by its requirement for uniformity in how it treats people. It operates under stringent external financial control from the legislature, and its ultimate constitutional goal is welfare and public equity.
Whereas private administration can, and often must, practice strategic discrimination based on contract and market segmentation, it uses flexible internal financial control, and its primary goal is always profit. That single difference in purpose dictates every other aspect of administration, from speed to transparency.
And this brings us full circle, all the way back to the discretionist view we started with. If administrators are required to pursue constitutional values and actively work toward that good society, as Graham Wallace argued, then they have to exercise immense discretion and institutional power.
Which raises a really essential question for you to consider as a citizen.
What systems, what checks, what cultural norms, beyond just simple elections and media scrutiny, must be robustly in place to ensure that this vast, unelected institutional discretion remains fully aligned with democratic will and the public interest.
And crucially, to prevent that immense power from accidentally or deliberately contributing to the creation of the evil society that we sought to avoid in the first place.
How does the citizen ensure that the backbone of the state stays healthy, accountable, and morally responsive?
That's something worth critically mulling over as you navigate your own interactions with the government. Thank you for joining the Deep Dive.
We'll see you next time.